Hello everyone. My name is Jace. I am 27 years old and I come from Brazil. But only 5 months ago, I could not speak English at all. I could not even say one full sentence like, "How are you?" without stopping and thinking too much. I felt completely lost whenever I tried to speak. Today, I want to share with you the story of how I learned English in just 5 months. I did this without paying for expensive classes, without traveling to an English-speaking country, and without wasting my time on methods that don't really work. This is not only my story, it can be your story too. If you ever feel frustrated, stuck, or embarrassed when you try to use English, then listen carefully. I was in the same place you are now. I know exactly how it feels. And I promise you, if you follow my journey step by step, you will discover how to improve your own English in a faster and easier way than you thought possible. Let's go back to the beginning, because my story did not start with confidence or motivation. It started with a big failure. And that failure changed my life. I always dreamed of working for an international company. My biggest goal was to become a software engineer in a large technology company. I loved computers. I loved writing code. I practiced day and night, and I became very good at it. After years of hard work, I finally got my chance. One day, I applied for a position at a huge company in the United States. A few weeks later, I received an email that said, "Congratulations, Jake, you are selected for an interview." I cannot describe how happy I was. I imagined moving to another country, living a new life, earning a good salary, and working with some of the best people in the world. But then, the interview happened, and that moment changed everything. I remember it clearly, as if it happened yesterday. I opened Zoom, and on my screen there were 3 interviewers. All of them were native English speakers. They started speaking, and immediately I felt like their voices were moving too fast, like a movie on fast forward. I could not understand most of what they said. Then one of them asked me the first question. "Jake, can you tell us a little about yourself and your experience in software development?" I panicked. In my head, I knew the answer. I wanted to say, "I have worked on many projects. I enjoy solving problems with code. I am passionate about technology." But when I opened my mouth, the words did not come out. Instead, I said something like, "Yes, I am a software. I do coding. Many projects. Good. I am very good." The silence that followed felt like a knife in my stomach. They looked at me politely, but I could see they were not impressed. They asked another question, but I couldn't answer that one either. In the end, one of them smiled kindly and said, "All right, Jake, thank you for your time." I knew what that meant. I had failed. I did not fail because I was not good enough in my field. I failed because I could not speak English. That was the day I truly understood the power of English. It was not just another language. It was the key to my dream. And at that moment, I realized I did not have that key. I felt ashamed. I felt embarrassed. I felt angry at myself. For years, I told myself, "I don't need English. I'll just focus on being the best at my job. That will be enough." But now, the truth was in front of me. Without English, I was invisible. That night, I made a decision. I would learn English. And not slowly, not someday, but now. I wanted to learn it fast.
I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. Most people, when they decide to learn English, immediately go and pay for expensive classes. But I did not do that. Why? Because I had already tried before, and those classes did not help me. 1 year earlier, I joined an online English course. The teacher gave me long lists of vocabulary to memorize, many grammar exercises, and boring rules to study. I worked hard for 3 months, but when I tried to have a real conversation, I still could not speak. So this time, I knew the answer was not expensive classes. If I really wanted to learn English fast, I needed to use a different method. I needed something real, something that worked in daily life. That was the beginning of my 5-month method. In the next part of this story, I will show you exactly what I did in the first 15 days and how those simple steps helped me finally start speaking English with confidence. After I made the decision to learn English, I told myself, this time I will not waste time on things that don't work. I need a method that really helps me speak. In the beginning, I made the same mistake that many learners make. I thought, if I learn more words, I will become fluent. I believed that if I memorized 1,000 new words, then I would be able to speak well. But that was not true. The truth is, I already knew hundreds of English words, but when I tried to speak, I could not use them. They stayed in my memory like locked boxes. So for the first 15 days, I did something very different. I did not study new words. Instead, I focused only on learning how to use the words I already knew. And this made all the difference. Here is exactly what I did. First, I created a survival sentence list. I sat down and thought carefully, what do I really need to say in daily life? If I meet someone, if I go to a cafe, if I need help, what sentences do I need? I wrote down 50 simple sentences that were important to me. For example, "Hi, how are you? Can you repeat that, please? I don't understand. I am learning English. I need a coffee, please." These sentences were simple but very useful. Every morning, I read all 50 sentences out loud, not once, not twice, but 10 times. At first, it felt slow and difficult. My tongue felt heavy, like it did not want to move. But after 5 days, something amazing happened. These sentences started to come out automatically. When I needed to say them in real life, I didn't have to think. They just flowed. Second, I started talking to myself in English every single day. This might sound funny, but it was one of the most powerful things I did. Whenever I was alone, I spoke in English. For example, when I was in the shower, I said, "I am taking a shower. The water is hot. I feel relaxed." When I made breakfast, I said, "I am making eggs. I like eggs. They are easy to cook." At first, I felt strange, almost silly, talking to myself. But then I realized something important. This was my private classroom. No one could hear me, no one could laugh at me, and no one could correct me harshly. It was my safe place to practice. After just 1 week, I noticed that my brain was starting to think in English. Third, I practiced 5 new sentences every day, but with a special technique. I did not just read them, I copied them exactly. I chose sentences from movies, YouTube, or real conversations. Then I repeated each one 10 times, but I also copied the emotion, the speed, and the pronunciation of the native speaker. For example, if in a movie someone said, "I don't believe this," in a surprised voice, I copied it with the same surprise. If someone said calmly, "That's fine, no problem," I repeated it calmly too. This helped me more than I expected. Slowly, my accent began to change. My sentences sounded more natural. It was like I was borrowing the voice of native speakers until it became part of me. By the end of the first 15 days, I noticed a big change. I stopped translating in my head. Before, I always thought in Portuguese first, then translated into English. But now, for simple sentences, the English words came directly. I could say things like, "I need water," or "I'm learning English," without any effort. And the best part? I started to feel confident. Even though I was still a beginner, I no longer felt stuck when trying to speak. These first 15 days gave me the foundation I needed, but I also knew this was only the beginning. After those 15 days, I was ready for the next step. I didn't just want to say short sentences. I wanted to have real conversations. I wanted to understand native speakers without translating. That was when the real practice began. After those first 15 days, I felt stronger. I could say simple sentences without thinking too much. But I knew this was not enough. I didn't want to just survive in English. I wanted to really communicate. I wanted to have conversations, to understand native speakers, and to feel natural when I spoke.
So I created a new plan. This was the stage I call real practice. It was the step that changed everything for me. The first problem I noticed was that my brain was too slow. I knew many words, but when I tried to speak, it was like my brain could not connect them quickly. I felt like I was always one step behind. For example, someone would ask me, "What did you do today?" In my head, I thought, "Okay, how do I answer this?" I had the words, but I could not put them together fast enough. To fix this, I used something I now call the question-answer method. It is very simple, but very powerful. Here's how it works. First, I ask myself a question in English. Second, I answer it immediately, without thinking too much. Third, I repeat the process many times, giving different answers. For example, let's take the question, "What did you do today?" At first, my answer was short. I worked. But I pushed myself to add more. I worked on my project. Then more details. I worked on my project for 3 hours. Even more. I worked on my project for 3 hours, then I took a break. And finally, I worked on my project for 3 hours, then I took a break and had some coffee. Every time I practiced,
I tried to add one more detail. This forced my brain to build longer sentences step by step. After a while, speaking started to feel more natural. Another example was the question, "What did you eat for breakfast?" At first, I said, "I ate eggs." Then I added, "I ate eggs and toast." Next, I said, "I ate eggs, toast, and a banana." Then I added, "I ate eggs, toast, and a banana because I was really hungry." And finally, I ate eggs, toast, and a banana because I was really hungry and I love eating a big breakfast. I practiced this method every single day for at least 30 minutes. It was like training my brain to think in English directly. Over time, my sentences became longer and smoother, and I stopped translating from Portuguese in my head. But speaking was only one part. Another problem I had was pronunciation. Even when I spoke correctly, I still sounded very foreign. Native speakers could understand me, but my accent was strong. I wanted to sound clearer, more natural. That's when I discovered the echo technique. It became one of my favorite tools. Here's how it works. Step 1. I listen to a native speaker from a movie, YouTube, or a podcast. Step 2. I pause after each sentence. Step 3. I repeat the sentence exactly the same way. Same speed, same rhythm, same emotion. For example, in one movie I heard a character say, "I don't know what you're talking about." I paused and I copied, "I don't know what you're talking about." I repeated it 10 times. At first it felt strange, but slowly my voice started to sound more like the actors.
Another time, in a podcast, the speaker said, "It was a beautiful day, so I decided to go for a walk." I paused and repeated, "It was a beautiful day, so I decided to go for a walk." After a few days of this practice, I noticed my pronunciation was improving quickly. After 1 month of doing the echo technique daily, even native speakers began to tell me, "Wow, your English sounds really natural." That gave me even more motivation. So in this stage of real practice, I used 2 powerful tools every day: the question-answer method to think and speak faster, and the echo technique to improve my pronunciation and sound more natural. Step by step, I was not just speaking English, I was starting to feel English. My brain was no longer translating, my tongue was no longer stuck, and my voice was slowly becoming confident. But this was not the end. I still needed more vocabulary and stronger listening skills. That became my next challenge. After I improved my speaking speed and pronunciation with the question-answer method and the echo technique, I realized something important. Vocabulary was still a problem. I often wanted to say something, but I didn't know the right words. Sometimes I replaced the word with another simple one, but it didn't sound right. For example, I wanted to say invitation, but since I didn't know the word, I said the paper for the party. People could guess what I meant, but it didn't sound natural. So I decided to build my vocabulary, but I did not want to memorize long lists of words like I did in school.
I had tried that before, and it didn't work. I could remember the words for a short time, but when I wanted to use them in a real conversation, my mind went blank. That's when I discovered what I now call the story method. This method completely changed the way I learned new words. Here's how it worked. Step 1, I chose 5 new words every day. Step 2, I created a short story using all 5 words together. Step 3, I read the story out loud at least 10 times. Step 4, I tried to use those new words in real conversations during the day. For example, one day my 5 words were excited, invitation, party, arrive, and surprise. I made a story. I was very excited because I received an invitation to a big party. When I arrived at the party, I got a huge surprise. It was actually my birthday party. This little story was simple, but because it had meaning and emotion, I remembered the words easily. The next time someone talked about being excited or receiving an invitation, I could use the words naturally. Another day, my words were nervous, interview, question, answer, and company. I made a story. I was very nervous before my interview. The company asked me many questions, but I gave good answers and they accepted me. This story reminded me of my real experience, so it became even more powerful. I did this every single day. 5 words, 1 story, 10 repetitions. After 3 months, I had learned over 1,000 new words, but not just memorize them, I could actually use them in real speaking because they were connected to stories and emotions. But vocabulary was not just about single words. I also learned that phrases are more powerful than words. For example, instead of just learning the word happy, I learned phrases like, I feel so happy today. That movie made me really happy. She looks happy with her new job. By learning words in context like this, I didn't have to stop and think about grammar. The phrases were ready to use, like small tools in my pocket. At the same time, I trained my brain to think in English by describing the world around me. When I went outside, I said to myself, the sky is blue, the weather is hot. I see people walking. That man is wearing a red shirt. This practice may sound small, but it kept English alive in my head all day long. I also asked myself questions like, what am I doing right now? And I answered, I am sitting in a chair, drinking coffee, and writing in my notebook. This was simple, but it forced me to use the words I knew and add new ones when I needed them. Every night, I wrote a short journal in English. At first, my sentences were very basic. Today, I went to work. I was tired. I ate pizza. It was good. But with time, I started to write longer sentences, and I tried to copy the style of native speakers from blogs, news articles, or books. This writing practice helped me remember new vocabulary and build confidence in forming sentences.
After a few weeks, something amazing happened. I was no longer translating words from Portuguese into English. The new words and phrases came naturally into my mind. It felt like a switch had been turned on inside my brain. By using the story method, describing the world around me, and writing daily, I built a strong vocabulary that I could actually use. This gave me a new kind of confidence. I no longer felt lost when I wanted to express myself. But, of course, vocabulary and writing were not enough. The next big challenge was understanding native speakers in real conversations. Fast, natural English. That became my next focus. After I built my vocabulary and felt more confident speaking, I realized that listening was still very difficult. I could understand English from my teacher or from slow recordings,
But when native speakers talked to each other, it felt like another language. They spoke fast, they connected words, and sometimes they used expressions I had never heard before. For example, when someone said slowly, "What are you going to do?" I understood it. But in real life, people didn't say it like that. They said, "What you gonna do?" The first time I heard it, I didn't even realize it was English. Another time, instead of "Did you eat yet?" someone said, "Jeet yet?" I thought it was a completely new word. At first, I felt frustrated. I thought, maybe I will never understand real English. But then, I decided not to give up. I created a new plan, a listening routine that completely changed the way I heard English. The first step was listening every day without subtitles. I chose materials I liked, TV shows, YouTube videos, and podcasts. At first, I understood very little, maybe only 20%. But I kept going because my goal was not to understand every single word. My goal was to get used to the rhythm, the music, and the flow of English. The second step was intensive listening practice. Here's what I did. I chose a short audio clip, maybe 30 seconds to 1 minute. I listened to it many times. The first time, I just listened. The second time, I tried to write down every word I heard. Then I checked the transcript or subtitles and compared them with my notes. Finally, I listened again and repeated the sentences out loud, copying the speed and rhythm. This practice was hard in the beginning, but very powerful. For example, I listened to an interview where the speaker said, "I should have done it earlier." At first, I thought he said, "I should have donut earlier." It made no sense. But when I checked the transcript, I realized it was should have, the fast way of saying should have. That moment was like a light bulb turning on in my head. I understood that native speakers connect words together, and many sounds disappear. The third step was shadowing. This was like the echo technique, but faster and more challenging. I listened to a short clip and I spoke at the same time as the speaker, trying to copy exactly. At first, it was impossible. I couldn't keep up. But I kept practicing, and slowly my mouth and ears got used to the speed. After a few weeks, I could follow along much better. Another thing that helped me was choosing listening materials that I truly enjoyed. If I listened to boring news, I lost focus quickly. But when I listened to topics I loved, for example, sports, self-development, or interesting stories, I forgot that it was English. I was just enjoying the content, and at the same time, my listening skills were growing. One special trick I used was to listen to the same podcast or video many times. The first time, I understood maybe 40%. The second time, 60%. The third time, 80%. By the fourth or fifth time, I almost understood everything. This repetition made my brain faster and gave me confidence that I could improve. I also started to notice patterns in real English. For example, instead of going to, people said gonna. Instead of want to, they said wanna. Instead of give me, they said gimme. At first, these sounded strange, but after listening again and again, my ears became comfortable with them. After 2 months of this listening practice, something amazing happened. I was watching a TV show, and suddenly I realized I was laughing at a joke without reading the subtitles. That was the first time I understood fast, natural English without help. I felt so happy and motivated. So in this stage, listening became my daily habit. I didn't worry if I didn't understand every word. I trusted the process, and slowly my ears were trained to catch the music of real English. But I still had one more problem. I could now understand better, and I could speak faster, but I still felt nervous when I had real conversations with native speakers. My confidence was not strong enough. That became my next big challenge. Even after I improved my vocabulary, pronunciation, and listening, there was still a big challenge in front of me. It was not about grammar or words or even understanding fast English. The real challenge was my confidence. Whenever I spoke to native speakers, my hands got sweaty, my heart beat faster, and my mind went blank. I thought about grammar mistakes before I even opened my mouth. Sometimes I stayed quiet because I was too afraid of sounding stupid. One time, I was in a cafe, and a tourist asked me for directions in English. I knew exactly what to say, but my voice got stuck. Instead of answering, I just pointed with my finger. After they left, I felt embarrassed and angry with myself. I thought, what is the use of all this practice if I can't speak when it matters?
That day, I made a promise to myself. I will not let fear control me. If I want to speak English fluently, I have to face my fear directly. So, I created what I call my confidence plan. The first step was practicing with myself. I talked to myself in English every day, as if I was talking to a friend. For example, while cooking, I said, "Now I am cutting the vegetables. I will add salt and pepper. This smells delicious." While walking outside, I said, "The sun is hot today. I see children playing football. I feel happy." This self-talk was simple, but it made me more comfortable speaking English without pressure. The second step was finding real people to talk to. At first, this was very scary, but I started small. I joined online language exchange apps where people wanted to practice languages together. I talked to other learners who were also afraid of making mistakes. That made me feel safe because we supported each other. Later, I pushed myself to speak with native speakers. In the beginning, I only managed short conversations. For example, I would say to someone online, "Hi, how are you? I'm learning English. Can I practice with you for 5 minutes?" Most people were kind and patient. Some even became friends, and we talked regularly. The third step was changing my mindset. Before, I thought mistakes were something bad. I felt ashamed when I made them. But then I realized something powerful. Mistakes are not signs of weakness. They are signs of progress. Every mistake showed me what I needed to improve. Every correction was a gift. I remember one conversation where I said, "Yesterday, I go to the park." My partner corrected me and said, "Oh, you mean, yesterday, I went to the park." Instead of feeling embarrassed, I smiled and repeated, "Yes, yesterday, I went to the park." That small correction stayed in my mind forever. I never forgot it again. The fourth step was daily speaking challenges. I gave myself small goals. One day, my goal was to ask a stranger one question in English. Another day, my goal was to record a 1-minute video of myself speaking English and post it online. At first, I was nervous, but with each challenge, I felt braver. One of the biggest breakthroughs happened when I joined an English-speaking club in my city. The first time I entered the room, I wanted to run away. Everyone was speaking quickly, and I felt lost. But I stayed, and I listened carefully. When it was time for me to speak, my voice was shaking, but I said a few sentences. People clapped and encouraged me. That gave me a huge boost of confidence. Slowly, I learned that confidence is not something you wait for. Confidence is something you create by taking small actions every day. The more I spoke, the less afraid I felt. After a few weeks of pushing myself like this, something amazing happened. One day, I had a 20-minute conversation with a native speaker online. I made mistakes, yes, but I didn't freeze, I didn't panic, and I enjoyed the conversation. When I finished, I thought, wow, I can really do this. Confidence did not come all at once. It came from daily practice, from facing fear again and again until fear became smaller and smaller. At this point, I could finally use my English in real conversations. But I knew there was still more to do. I wanted not only to speak with confidence, but also to think more deeply in English, to express complex ideas, and to keep improving without stopping. That became my next mission. After I built my confidence in speaking, I noticed another problem. I could have conversations, but sometimes my mind worked too slowly. I was still thinking in my first language and then translating into English. This made me feel frustrated. So I asked myself, how can I stop translating and start thinking directly in English? This became my next mission. The first step was to surround myself with English in daily life. I changed the settings on my phone and computer into English. I wrote my to-do lists in English. I even started labeling things in my room. I put a paper on the mirror that said mirror, a paper on the door that said door, and so on. Every time I looked at these words, my brain slowly started to connect objects with English, not with my first language. The second step was using English for my thoughts. Whenever I had free time, I talked to myself silently in my mind. For example, while waiting for the bus, I thought, the bus is late, I'm tired, but I have time to listen to a podcast. While cooking, I thought, I need to wash the vegetables. I should add more salt this time. These small, simple thoughts trained my brain to use English naturally. The third step was storytelling in English. Every night before sleeping, I told myself the story of my day in English. I said things like, this morning I woke up early. I felt lazy, but I forced myself to study. At lunch, I met my friend, and we laughed a lot. At first, it was difficult. Sometimes I didn't know the exact word, but I replaced it with simple ones. For example, if I didn't know the word umbrella, I just said the thing for rain. This way, I kept thinking in English instead of stopping. The fourth step was avoiding translation. When I learned a new word, I tried not to translate it into my first language. Instead, I used pictures, examples, or definitions in English. For example, instead of learning apple equals my first language, I thought apple equals a red fruit that is sweet and round. This helped me connect words directly to ideas, not translations. Another thing that helped me was using English in fun ways. I played games in English, I watched comedy shows, and I even sang along to English songs. Singing especially helped me because it trained me to think in rhythm and remember words faster. One powerful trick I discovered was asking myself questions in English. For example, I asked, "What do I need to do tomorrow?" And then I answered myself, "Tomorrow I will go shopping. I need to buy milk and bread." I asked, "How do I feel today?" And I answered, "I feel tired but proud because I studied hard." This made my brain start conversations inside my head, in English. After a few weeks of doing this, I noticed a big change. I didn't pause as much during conversations. Words started to come faster. Sometimes I even dreamed in English. The first time I had a dream in English, I woke up smiling. I thought, yes, my brain is finally thinking in English. But I also learned something important. Thinking in English doesn't mean you never make mistakes.
It just means your brain chooses English first without translation. Mistakes still happen, but you can fix them faster. At this point, my English was no longer just something I studied. It was becoming a natural part of my daily life. And when that happened, everything else, listening, speaking, reading, writing, improved faster. Still, I knew one more thing was very important: consistency. If I wanted to keep my progress, I had to make English a permanent habit, not just a short project. That became my focus in the next stage. By the time I had started thinking in English naturally, I realized that consistency was the key. I could speak, listen, and understand better, but if I didn't practice every day, all my progress would slowly disappear. I needed a system that made English part of my life, not just a short-term project. The first step was setting a daily rule. I would speak, read, write, or listen to English every day without excuses. At first, it wasn't easy. Some days I felt tired or lazy. But I reminded myself, English is my future. 2 hours every day is not too much. Even if I didn't have 2 hours, I always did something. 10 minutes of listening, 5 minutes of writing, or talking to myself while cooking. Small, consistent efforts were better than none. The second step was using English in all daily activities. For example, when I was cooking, I narrated everything in English. I am boiling water. I am adding pasta. It smells good. I like cooking. While walking outside, I described what I saw. The car is red. The man is running fast. The sky is cloudy today. These simple actions kept my brain in English all day long. The third step was tracking my progress. I kept a notebook where I wrote what I did in English each day. I wrote down new words, phrases, and sentences I used successfully. I also wrote down mistakes I made and corrected them. This notebook became my personal record of improvement. Looking back, I could see how much I had grown in just 1 month. This motivated me to continue every single day. The fourth step was mixing fun with learning. I didn't want English to feel like a boring school subject. So I watched movies I loved, listened to music I enjoyed, and read stories that interested me, all in English. But I didn't just watch or listen passively. I paused, repeated sentences, copied pronunciation, and tried to predict what would happen next in the story. This made learning natural, fun, and effective. Another habit that helped me was setting weekly challenges. For example, one week I challenged myself to have 3 conversations with native speakers. Another week, I tried to write a paragraph every day about my thoughts or experiences. These small challenges pushed me out of my comfort zone and gave me a sense of achievement when I completed them. I also started combining skills together. I would read a story, listen to the audio version, and then summarize it in English out loud. I would watch a video, write down new phrases, and then practice them by creating my own sentences. By combining reading, listening, writing, and speaking, I learned faster and remembered more. The most important part of consistency was making English unavoidable. I surrounded myself with English everywhere. My phone, computer, social media, and even my music were in English. I followed English-speaking influencers and joined online groups where people practiced English every day. The more I saw, heard, and spoke English, the more natural it became. After a few months of this daily habit, I noticed a big change. Speaking English no longer felt like a task. Listening didn't feel difficult. I could write and think in English without hesitation. My brain had fully adjusted to using English in daily life. At this stage, I was confident, fluent in many conversations, and thinking in English. But there was still one final step: reaching mastery and being able to perform in high-pressure situations, like my dream job interview. That became my focus in the final part of my journey. By the time I had built strong habits and consistent daily practice, I could speak, listen, and think in English comfortably. But I knew that real mastery was something more. It wasn't just about practicing at home. I wanted to be able to perform under pressure, to speak confidently with native speakers, and to succeed in situations that truly mattered, like my dream job interview.
The first step was simulating real-life situations. I created scenarios where I might need English: ordering food at a restaurant, asking for directions, explaining my work, or answering interview questions. I practiced these situations aloud every day, as if I were already in them. For example, I would sit in my room and pretend I was at an interview. "Hello, my name is Jake. I have experience in software development. I worked on several projects, and I enjoy problem solving." At first, my voice shook, but repetition made it more natural. The second step was practicing with native speakers. I joined online English groups and conversation clubs where people from all over the world practiced English together. The first few times I was nervous and spoke very little, but I reminded myself everyone there was learning and mistakes were normal. Slowly, I started to contribute more to conversations, ask questions, and share my thoughts. The more I spoke, the more confident I became. Another key step was preparing for high-pressure moments. I remembered my first failed interview and the panic I felt. I realized that confidence under pressure doesn't come from luck, it comes from preparation. I wrote down the 10 most common questions I might be asked in an interview, such as, "Tell us about yourself," "Why do you want to work here?" or "Describe a challenge you solved." I practiced answering these questions in detail, first alone, then in front of a mirror, and finally with friends or language partners. I even recorded myself and listened back to notice mistakes or unnatural sentences. I also focused on thinking quickly in English. I played a simple game with myself. I would pick a random topic, like my favorite hobby or a movie I watched, and try to speak for 2 minutes without stopping. At first, I paused a lot, but after several weeks, my mind became faster and sentences started flowing naturally. This prepared me to respond in real conversations or interviews without hesitation. Another powerful technique I used was shadowing under pressure. I would listen to a native speaker, pause, and immediately repeat what they said exactly like them, not slowly, not perfect, but fast and natural. I even practiced this while imagining I was in a real conversation with a boss or colleague. This made my brain react automatically when I needed to speak, and it reduced hesitation. I also worked on expressing ideas clearly and naturally. I didn't just memorize sentences. I practiced explaining things in my own words. For example, instead of just saying, "I like coding," I practiced, "I like coding because it challenges me to solve problems. I enjoy learning new programming languages and building useful applications." This made my English sound fluent and confident, not robotic or memorized. Finally,
I started testing myself in real situations. I spoke to strangers in English at cafes, online meetings, and community events. I even volunteered to give short presentations in English at local groups. Every time I did this, my confidence grew and my fluency improved. I learned that the more real-world practice I had, the less fear I felt. After a few months of these techniques, I noticed something amazing. I could speak English naturally, fluently, and confidently, even with native speakers. I could respond quickly, explain complex ideas, and understand fast conversations. My brain no longer translated, it simply used English as its main language. This stage was the final preparation before my dream interview. I had all the skills I needed: vocabulary, listening, pronunciation, grammar, thinking in English, and confidence under pressure. I felt ready. I knew that if I applied everything I had learned, I could finally succeed where I had failed 5 months ago. The day of my second interview finally arrived. I remember feeling nervous, but this time it was different. I wasn't the same Jake who froze 5 months ago. I had practiced, prepared, and built my confidence. I knew that I could speak clearly, understand questions, and express myself naturally.
When I opened Zoom, I saw 3 interviewers, all native speakers. At first, my heart beat faster. But then I took a deep breath and reminded myself, I have done everything I can to prepare. I am ready. The first question came. Jake, can you tell us about yourself and your experience in software development? This time, the words came out easily. I said, Hello, my name is Jake. I have been a software developer for several years. I have worked on projects involving web development and mobile apps. I enjoy problem solving and learning new technologies. In my last project, I developed a system that improved efficiency by 20%. I spoke clearly, naturally, and confidently. They smiled and nodded. The next questions came, and I answered each one without hesitation. I explained my experience, shared examples, and even added small personal stories to make my answers more engaging. I noticed that my sentences were longer, my pronunciation was clear, and I didn't translate in my head. Everything flowed naturally. At one point, they asked a challenging question about a technical problem. In the past, I might have panicked, but now I approached it calmly. I thought in English and explained step by step how I would solve it. They listened attentively and even asked follow-up questions. I answered confidently and clearly. When the interview ended, one of them said, "Thank you, Jake. We enjoyed speaking with you." I smiled, knowing I had done my best. For the first time, I felt proud of my English and proud of myself. A few days later, I received the call I had been waiting for. "Jake, congratulations! You got the job." I couldn't believe it. My dream job, the same company that rejected me months ago, now wanted me. My heart was full of happiness. My starting salary was $5,000 a month, more than I had ever imagined. I immediately called my parents. "Mom, Dad, I did it!" My mother cried tears of joy. My father, who rarely shows emotion, said, "We always knew you could." In that moment, I realized that my journey wasn't just for me, it was for them too. With my first salary, I bought my father a beautiful watch and my mother a gold necklace. Seeing their smiles and tears, I felt that all my hard work,
struggles, and late nights had been worth it. Looking back, I understand that my success was not about talent alone. It was about mindset, consistent practice, and facing fear. I want to share the most important lessons I learned. Mindset is everything. I stopped saying, I can't learn English. I told myself, I can improve every day. Believing in yourself is the first step to success. Surround yourself with English. Change your phone. Listen to podcasts. Watch movies and read in English. Make it part of your life so your brain absorbs it naturally. Speak without fear. Mistakes are normal. Speak as much as you can, even if you make errors. People appreciate effort and understand you will improve. Active listening and shadowing. Don't just listen. Repeat sentences, mimic pronunciation, and practice rhythm and tone. This improves fluency and makes your English sound natural. Learn vocabulary in context. Don't memorize long lists of words. Use words in sentences, stories, and daily life. This helps you remember and use them naturally. Learn grammar naturally. Focus on using English in real situations instead of memorizing rules. Correct mistakes and practice proper sentence structures. Consistency over perfection. Small daily efforts matter more than occasional perfection. Speak, write, read, or listen every day, even if it's only 10 minutes. If you follow these steps, practice consistently, and believe in yourself, you can achieve fluency too. Remember, English is not just a language. It's a tool that can open doors to opportunities, confidence, and a better life. Imagine yourself 6 months from now, speaking English fluently, understanding native speakers, and expressing yourself clearly. Start today. Speak, listen, practice, and never give up. Your future self will thank you. This journey changed my life completely, and it can change yours too. If I can do it, so can you.